welcome to the Men's Fellowship, everybody. I'm still a bit uncomfortable with the fact that we're going national and international. I always used to look forward to welcoming the Bridge Street people, so I'm going to welcome them specially. And I'd also like to welcome all first-timers. Coming to something like this is a bit of an unusual experience, and I'm sure that you're wondering what's going to happen and what you're going to hear and how you're going to feel about some of these things that we're going to talk about. Just want to hasten to assure you that all of us were first timers once, and I think many of us have come back. And so we hope that you'll enjoy today and that you'll come back again and become part of our fellowship. So today is day 77, according to Al. So once again, we're on a Zoom meeting. I think we're going to always have a Zoom meeting, we've decided, but a Zoom meeting doesn't really capture the vibe of the face-to-face meetings. And I do want to emphasize the fact that we are about friendship, firstly and foremostly. And how can we have friendships unless we get together? So we do meet from time to time, not just to hear speakers, but in small groups. And once a year, we get together and have a 3-day meeting off-site. I hope that if you like what we're doing, that you'll consider going to one of those small groups. So we're a fellowship, which is sort of an old-fashioned word, but it really means that we're a sort of friendship group. We're people of like backgrounds, like interests, like jobs, etc., etc. And we're a men's group, so we're here to explore things seen from perhaps a male perspective. We're also here to see the linkage and explore the linkage between faith, which many of us have, not everybody, but a goodly proportion of our group here has some sort of faith in God. And we like to see to explore the linkage between life and faith. And we do that through listening to our great speakers who are boldly willing to talk about their lives, careers, families, and really explain how faith has affected them in good times and bad times. And we're very grateful for these speakers. And today we welcome Tony McLellan, an old friend of mine. Tony has had a very significant corporate career that no doubt will come out in the discussion. He was an executive of major companies, an entrepreneur, a board member, a chairman, and he's also given a lot of his time to good causes. And today we have to announce that Tony is an author. Now, as an author myself, it gives me great pleasure to welcome somebody else to our swelling ranks. So Tony and his wife, Ray, live in the Hills District now and near to their family. And Tony, welcome. And we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Indeed, Tony has written the book, and no surprises, the background photo, A Glorious Ride. I was very fortunate to receive my copy a couple of days ago, and it was a great read. Tony, welcome. Thank you for joining with us this morning.
Thank you. It's a great honor, Peter, to be amongst this terrific group of people.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Gentlemen, I might say before we start the interview that you might wish to choose speaker view so that you can get a good look at Tony as we go through this. And otherwise, it's great if you do want to turn your video on, because as Oliver said, we are a fellowship, and it's great to be able to see you in person if you're in a position to do so. So, Tony, I've read through this, and you've had an amazingly full life. Incredible life. And it all starts back in the 1940s in the bush. So tell us, what was it like growing up on your family's sheep station back in the 40s?
Oh, it's a funny thing. It's only when I started to write the book that I thought about it. It was just part of life, that's the way it was. And but it's a long way from anywhere. And it's a big property, a famous property called Jumble Plains. And my grandfather, who built the property, was very well recognized in the district and made it rather special. It had a championship golf course, tennis courts, a big ballroom in the house where they had community functions. It was the stopping point for Cobb and Co coaches. To this day, the mail goes straight into the house because there's no mailbox on the road. They're used to going in to change the horses. So it was a rather special place. I didn't appreciate that when I was a young fellow. And in fact, one of the things that I remember graphically was the rabbit plague. And I said in my first draft of the book that I think I've killed 100,000 rabbits. We're trying to get rid of the rabbits. And Nick Cater thought, oh gosh, what a great title for the book, The Rabbit Killer. And anyway, eventually this photo arose and he came up with the idea of A Glorious Ride. But a different sort of life and a tough life in many ways. And my dad was an alcoholic and a mess. My mum was an alcoholic and slightly less a mess. So it was a bit traumatic and sad upbringing.
Well, actually, on that note, you had quite an abrupt entry really into adulthood when your father passed away when you were only 15 from the alcohol, I gather.
Yes.
That must have had a huge impact on you. In fact, in the book, you say you can even smell the soil at the burial.
Yes, it's amazing how things like that stick in your mind. I suppose at the funeral or at the burial, I remember the freshly dug earth, the smell of that, and I remember crying when they lowered the coffin into the grave, and was really ashamed because I'd been told that grown men don't cry, and I was trying to be brave and a grown man, and I realised afterwards that that was a natural thing to do, and obviously was comforted. But I was then thrust into it. I was then 16. I'd left school when I was 15 when Dad got sick, and I just turned 16 when he died. And I was thrust into the responsibility of managing this enormous sheep station at 16. So I grew up pretty quickly.
Your mum had returned to Sydney to be with your sisters, and
Yes.
you were left to manage the sheep station.
Yes, I was left on my own in this enormous homestead, and had to cook and sew and clean and manage the men and manage the affairs of the station. So there's not much time for youthful exploits. You just had to grow up and do whatever you had to do.
It's amazing. And it wasn't easy times, were there? Because you had quite massive floods.
We had incredible floods just when, for 8 months where I started, we could only walk into the property through thigh-deep water. And that went on for 8 months. We had 5 vehicles bogged at one stage. It was tough going. And then almost immediately thereafter, we went into a drought. And I remember carting hay from a town called Geary between Wellington and Dubbo, and carting hay a couple of trips a day and running off the road with a load of hay and so on because I was so tired. But we had to keep the stock alive. So it's tough going on with that.
That's quite an apprenticeship you had at, your late teenage years. Do you think, looking back, that it did put you in good stead?
Well, I think so. I think the theme of my book is from Alfred Lord Tennyson, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And I think I can fairly say that I've been practicing that for a long time, and resolved accordingly when out of the cemetery when they buried my dad, and so that's been a driving force. And I think this sort of tough experience has just made me roll up my sleeves and get stuck into things.
Well, maybe we'll, on that note, roll up our sleeves and start to sort of explore the amazing career you've had. So let's fast forward to 1975. You're married, you're living in Sydney, you've developed a career now in property, and you meet someone over a business lunch, and this is about to change the course of your life. Tell us what happened.
Well, I invited this man who was the new chairman of Travelodge. I'd done business with Travelodge, quite a bit of business, and he was the new chairman and taken a major interest in the organization. And he's a very charming Hungarian origin man who had just moved to Australia, Peter Monk. And he called me up after the lunch. I used to have a lunch every month or so in our boardroom, and said, "Oh, Tony, that was the most amazing lunch. I'd like to get to know you." So I went into his office and met him a few days later, and he told me about a project that he had seeded and was about ready to get going with in Egypt, building a new city for 45,000 people near the pyramids, called Pyramids Oasis in Cairo. And I'd had quite a bit of property experience, and he asked me whether I'd go and have a look at the project and give him a commentary. And so my wife and I flew to London, spent a week looking at the drawings, went to Cairo, met all the ministers and so on, came back and reported to Peter, said, "Oh, it's just a sensational project. Here's 5 things that I'd consider of concern, areas that I'd be looking to address." And he said, "Oh, Tony, that's terrific. And I appreciate what you've done." And he said, "Now I'd like you to go and run it." No, I'm sit in the corner office of my company. I got 50 employees. I'm the biggest condominium developer in Sydney. I thought I was happy with what I'm doing. Anyway, he talked me into it, and we decided that we'd make a proper commitment. We learned Arabic 6 nights a week. The professor of Semitic studies came to our house, and we packed up and went to Egypt, and took our 3 kids with us, and got stuck into this monstrous project. I ended up hiring 1,000 people, had to go and find an office, all that stuff, and got into this monstrous project, and very involved with a lot of people from the Middle East who had invested in it. And I traveled an enormous amount to the Middle East, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and so on, to raise capital and talk to shareholders and so on. So that was an unbelievable experience. I just turned 36, and I was doing a big job for a 36-year-old.
Absolutely, yeah. But things didn't turn out that well, I understand. So in the end, over a few-year period, it became a very protracted process.
It did, Peter. President Sadat, who was, I thought, a fantastic man, and with whom I had a bit of a relationship, because this was the biggest project in Egypt since the Aswan Dam. So he was right behind it. But just before he got assassinated, came under a lot of political, he did, and the project came under a lot of political pressure, and he suddenly nationalized it. So what we had was taken from us, and then we set about getting compensation, not only for us, but for all the shareholders, investors. And that was a process that I started within a few months of it being nationalized, and fought for 13 3/4 years in all over the world, in the World Court in The Hague, and in the in Washington and in Paris, where we had a lot of hearings. And finally, they came to my house, our house in Atlanta, Georgia, where we were then living, and made us an offer, which we accepted. And the thing was over a few days later, we got tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. So while that was all happening, of course, your career continued, and notwithstanding these difficulties you had, you actually accepted another invitation from Peter Monk, this time to go to Canada.
Peter became my hero. He was an amazing man, and he asked me if I'd be prepared to move to Toronto. We'd moved from Cairo to London after the nationalisation, and his office was in London, and I was commuting to Tahiti because they then asked me to be president of a huge resort in Tahiti, and I was going from London to Tahiti quite a lot. It was an awful trip. And he said, would you be prepared to go to Toronto, which was his hometown, and build a new office for us? And I said, yes, I'd do that. So I went to Toronto, built the office, and a few months later, he moved across. And he called me one day and he said, Tony, you're free? And I'm just finishing something, Peter. I can be there in 5 minutes. And he said, I'm in the hotel just up the road. And so I finished what I was doing, walked up the road, and in the room with him, in the hotel room, was his partner of 25 years, David Gilmore. And he said, Tony, David and I have just agreed to sell a hotel chain. They had 69 hotels. And we want to build a resources company. We want to build a gold company and an oil and gas company. And I said, oh, gee, that's pretty impressive. Very good. And he said, and we want you to be president. So I'm a country boy from the bush. I've been in the property business. What would I know about gold mining or oil and gas exploration? No, you're a goer. You get things done. We can trust you. We'd like you to take it on. So I did, rather brashly, I think. And we formed what is now the world's biggest gold company, Barrick Gold. So I was president of that, and we set it on its course, and then branched out into, spent more time in the oil and gas business. And oil and gas turned out to be a very unsatisfactory investment because I don't know whether you remember, but the price of oil fell to about $13 in '86, and that made it very difficult to make any money out of.
Just give us a glimpse of what life was like for you in the '80s, because you were frantically busy at this time.
Oh, dear. Thanks, Peter. My sort of some of the telling factors are I remember one year looking back, and I spent 35% of my nights in a foreign country, living in Toronto, but going to Europe all the time. On the Concorde was the best way to travel, and I went to, obviously, back to Asia, and we still had a hotel company headquartered in Australia, so used to go down there, used to go to Tahiti, and it was a terrible lot of traveling. And Peter said to me one day something I'd never seen before or since. He said, Tony, I really appreciate what you're doing. You're away from home a lot. I want you to take Ray with you, my wife, anytime you feel like it, and we'll pay. And I said, gosh, that's a really nice thing. And so we started the process. Ray, I'm going to Paris next Thursday. Would you like to come? Yeah, that'd be great. So off we went to Paris. Ray filled in the hotel laundry list and organized the functions that I was having. I'm raising capital then for the gold company. And then I'd spent a year negotiating a deal with Turkey, leased 9.5 million acres onshore and offshore the Black Sea coast for exploration. I'm going back and forth to Ankara, Turkey, with capital, where the parliament is. And I'd go the first time, Ray would love it. And the second time, she said, I was there last month. I'm not interested in going. So in the end, it didn't cost Peter an arm and a leg, but it was a very, very smart thing to do and help keep the family together.
Yeah, so you're in your 40s and you're leading this frantic life. If it's okay, I'm just going to ask you to reflect a bit on this, because in your book, you have a sentence where you say that you have an unrelenting determination to succeed.
Yes.
And you'd come from, as you described, from at 16 managing a sheep station now to flying the Concorde like you were hopping on a bus. What do you think is the cause of that? Do you think possibly there's a sort of a deep sense of insecurity, perhaps, that is driving it?
It was great. My insecurity exists to this day. I went to the little school in the station next to us. I used to ride my bike there. 11 kids there. Nobody ever in my grade. So I was the only one ever in my class. And then my parents sent me off to Scots College when I was 11. And I can't tell you how frightened I was. I didn't know how to mix with other boys. There's 1,000 boys. They put me in a dorm with 11 boys. And I was really, really quite frightened and nervous. And that, I think, has driven me very much to this day. When I tell our own family, our own children, that I was insecure, they shake their heads and they don't get it. They don't understand it. But that was a big concern and a fear of mine. And then my parents were both in a mess. And I think that's very much the thing that was driving me. And I met years and years later in Atlanta, one of the top headhunters in all of America, somebody who'd hire the chairman of Citibank or something. And I had a private lunch with him. And I said, what do you look for when you look for the chairman of Citibank? And he said, not. I thought he'd say, somebody who graduated from Harvard, somebody who was captain of his football team. But he said, somebody who started work young. And often those people are from disadvantaged backgrounds and they just have to tough it out. And I could see myself there. And so those people, I think, often have drive and commitment to cut through it.
Well, that drive had its consequences. And you also write in your book that at the age of 47, you reach quite a turning point. You write that you'd become very proud and you weren't very happy with the effects that this was having. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Peter, it's the most important event of my whole life. Ray and I had a big argument, and Ray said, well, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to go back to Australia. And so just a waste of time, this female chatter. And I went off and did something else. In fact, I went to a tennis ranch, and I came back and she'd gone. She'd left with our daughter to come back to Australia. And I couldn't believe that she had the guts to do that. I'm really grateful she did. And when I look back on it, and it just so happened we'd started going to church the previous weekend, and the minister of the church, doing what all good ministers do, was coming around to visit us. Ray wasn't there. I said, where's Ray? And I said, she's just headed back to Australia and I'm here on my own. And I was a mess. I was full of tears and concerned about myself. And he said, "Tony, you need Jesus." And I said, no, I need help. I didn't know who Jesus was. And I need help. I've got to get this marriage back together. And he prayed with me. It never happened to me before. And I committed my life to God and asked him to help me get through this. And I took a few days to get Ray to take my phone call. Finally, she did and agreed to see me if I went back. I went down to Sydney. She went to Sydney and stayed with some old friends. And we headed back. I headed down there and we were reunited, both feeling very awkward about it. But she was just so brave and so encouraging. And we spent a week there, and it just so happened the following day was our anniversary on the 26th of January when we had the huge celebration. And we stayed with friends who were right on the water at Elizabeth Bay, the most incredible experience. And we came back home, stopped in Tahiti. I had some business to do there, and we started a new life. And started getting involved in our church, and my minister, who's a very smart guy and very good with business people, said, "Tony, I want you to lead a Bible study group." And I said, "My God, what would I know about the Bible? I know there's an Old Testament, there's a New Testament. I'm not sure which comes first, but they're there together." And he said, "No." He said, "You're a born leader and you'll be good at it." So he encouraged me to do that. And I got saved in January, and we started in May, started a Bible study at home. And at one stage, I was leading 5 Bible studies a week, not only at home, but out in restaurants with men. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it taught me the Bible. I didn't have any idea, and I was so petrified of embarrassing myself. I do so much homework before every session, and I picked up all sorts of things that I had no idea about.
We'll come back to that and pick up the story a bit more from there. But let's go back, if we may, to that crisis moment for you. I mean, it's not easy to share this, but what effect do you think your striving had on you? And you speak about becoming bitter and angry and the impact it had on your family. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, it's good of you to ask, Peter, but I haven't really sort of reflected on that perhaps as much as I should. But I know that the tension of all the traveling and the business ventures that I was involved in, the responsibilities just wore me out. And I wasn't spending enough time with Ray or at home nurturing the kids and that I should have as a proper father. And so no wonder I turned bitter. No wonder, I don't mean to excuse it, but I did. And I'm good on Ray for toughing it out for such a long time. And then finally, she couldn't do it. And in fact, if she'd kept putting up with it, who knows where we would have been now. But here we are. We've just not long ago, a few months ago, celebrated our 60th year of marriage, which is the most gorgeous thing. And I'm so fortunate. I wouldn't have been anywhere without her. And now more and more appreciate the contribution she's made to my life.
Absolutely. Among other things, you say that you moved in 41 different homes.
Yes.
I don't think there'd be many wives who would manage to put up with that.
Hard to believe. And, you know, she was a school teacher by training, but she became an interior designer, had a a good sized business in Atlanta for a number of years. We were there for 15 years, and then prior to that in Houston for 5 years. And so she'd had pretty practice on her own homes, but she did our church, did lots of offices and so on. She was pretty damn good at it. Did the homes for the company that I was running. And 41 homes, I think, in 8 countries. So it's a lot of moving around.
So you have this decisive turning point, and as you say, you committed your life to God. One of your first things you do, you and Ray, is you set up a foundation, the McLellan Foundation, to help serve the poor. I am a little intrigued by the name, the McLellan Foundation. Do you think there was still an element of kind of ego or pride in name?
I'll bet you there was, Peter. I'll bet you there was, but it's in America. It's the most common way. That's what most foundations bear the name of the family, and I suppose we just followed it automatically. In fact, one of the biggest foundations is the McLellan Foundation, just up the road, and Hugh McLellan, I got to know quite well. I said, you'll have to straighten out the spelling of your name. But he's been a fantastic, a generous, wonderful man. And I suppose I was a bit jealous of his success, and I just called it that. We had no idea that it might grow like it has, and but we wanted to get started and discipline ourselves in trying to help other people, and got it in a way and got it away in America. Started 2 Christian not-for-profit organizations there, one called We Care America, both of which I chaired, and then came back to Australia and got involved in, first of all, Opportunity International, as the director there for many years. Then was asked to become chairman of Habitat for Humanity, which I chaired for many years, and then asked to become chairman of Australian Christian Lobby. So in those organizations, there are plenty of opportunities to support them financially, which we did, and we're just really proud to be able to do that.
So after your conversion, so to speak, and coming to faith and continuing in Atlanta, it wasn't as if your business career then sort of skyrocketed. In fact, perhaps you might say the humbling process that you went through continued for some years. Tell us what happened next.
Oh boy. One of the organizations that we had and became involved with and learned to support was Walk Through the Bible, headquartered in Atlanta, and I became joint, and it was a member of the President's Council and so on. And we went to contemporaneously. I started a software company, and I couldn't raise the capital that I wanted, that needed to get it going properly. Put all the cash that we had, and then we sold our cars and used the cash from the cars to carry on. Eventually ran right out of money, and in the process our house was foreclosed on. We lost our house. We lost some furniture, so we were absolutely flat broke. And I remember coming home from church one day and finding $100 pinned to the door, and it just had a little note saying, "We love you." Things like that happened all the time. People stepped up and helped us in all sorts of ways. And during this time, we went to a retreat at Walk Through the Bible, and we got a weekend of a talk about John 15, the vine, how God prunes us. Those he loves, he prunes so that they'll bear more fruit. And it suddenly occurred to us that maybe that's what was happening to us. We were being pruned to prepare us to bear more fruit. It's a very painful process, but what it did was free us up from the Great Depression, that we'd done something terrible by God and he was punishing us. And we battled and battled, and then met an investor from the Netherlands, a Christian man, Jan Baan, who came to see us and said, I love what you're doing. Would 10 million do? 10 million. And I said, yeah, that'll do. That'll get us going. And he subsequently put another 15 million in, and we built this decent sized company out of it. Eventually we headed back to Australia and learning this lesson, wondering where it would lead. And we got involved in these other things in Australia, and I became chairman of a good number of mining companies in Australia, which during the boom made me look good because the mining business was very successful, and some people might have thought that it was the chairman's cause and nothing to do with me really, but we had some success there. And then blow me down if CSIRO didn't approach me and said, you've had experience in the mining industry, we've got an invention here that we think might be really applicable. So show it to me, and I did. I said, this is fantastic. And they then asked me to give them a proposal to commercialize this invention. And it is an invention for doing assays of minerals in rock. So you look at the rock and figure out what the interior is made up of. And I made a bid for this company and made a deal with CSIRO. The company took off, and we just recently, I'd say recently, a week ago, 10 days ago, raised another 50 million at 22.5 times the original par value. So the share price of the company has exploded, and we have that in our foundation. So we have this millions of dollars sitting here in this company that we'll be able to give away. And so I'm certain that that pruning that we went through was to get our mindset right for this extraordinary blessing.
Yeah, you, on that note, you write in your book that after your conversion, quote, my desire to be successful in business did not change, but it was driven by a deeper purpose.
Yes.
Do you think that came from this pruning?
Well, I'm sure it's about serving others. And one of the defining things that happened to me during this period in Atlanta, when we were broke and just about to get funded for the software company, was meeting the man who wrote the book Half Time. Half Time has become sort of a popular item, but he came to Atlanta and I was introduced to him, and I was really taken. So I bought a copy of the book for myself, and then liked it so much, I bought a copy for everybody else. And basically, he's saying at halftime, you better stop, take a look back, and see what you're going to do with the other half. And that really changed me and Ray too, in a significant way, where we thought, you know, we can still be driven and ambitious and trying to be successful. But it's not about us. It's about what we can do with the money. And that's really changed our attitude dramatically.
Yeah. I'm going to invite the men just in a moment to ask questions that they may have. But let me, and the way to do that again, just by way of reminder, is the raise hand function. But Tony, while the men prepare for that, just one last question. In writing the book and looking back, you've obviously had time to reflect. Do you think you can see now perhaps more clearly God's hand at work in the large and in the small events of your life?
Oh, it's staggering that I didn't have any idea about it. I didn't know what he was up to. I didn't know who he was, and so I'm just relentlessly pursuing my own selfish objectives. And now I think I decided to write the book principally for our grandkids, to get a record together of what might be of use to them. But in the process, I've really had to think about and thought about, what are the factors affecting my life, and why am I like I am today, and how the heck I can get rid of this pride, which is still a huge factor in my life. But yes, I've learned a lot. I believe I've learned a lot.
Mm. Thank you, Tony. We've now got time for questions from the men, and we're going to start with Stuart.
Hey, Tony. Well done on being brave enough to share the story with us. For those of us a little younger than you who are just getting into business for ourselves, what's the two pieces of advice you'd give us?
Sorry, Stuart, I'm a bit hard of hearing. Could you just put the last bit again?
Yeah. So I'm in my early 50s. I got into business for myself about 5 years ago.
Right.
And during this crisis, I've actually done a little bit of thinking about who's in charge of our company. And it's not me, it's the big man upstairs.
Right.
What advice would you give to guys like us just getting started?
I wish I had a better appreciation of what's really important in life. When I started, I thought it was important to be successful and have a lot of money. And that wasn't the key to it at all. And so I spent too much of my effort trying to win deals and convince people to do things that would make me seem to be successful, rather than perhaps serving other people.
Lindsay, you have a question.
Tony, if you could reflect on your life now, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
Son, you have to know who God is and how he manages every aspect of your life. You have to submit to him. You have to be conscious of what he wants you to do and let the other things flow.
Kevin asked a question in the chat. How do you see the future of the resource industry here with the challenges with balancing with the environmental movement?
Oh dear, it's a worry. I was chairman of a coal company that we sold for 3.4 billion to the Chinese, and so I've had some experience. We had 5 mines and quite a lot of activity. Chairman of gold companies and mineral sands and so on. We're in for a tough time. I think we're in for a tough time, and I think the environmentalists are going to win this day and eventually shut down coal. I hate the thought of it, but that's where I think it may be heading. And we see the dramatic drop in iron ore prices, and it's on a ridiculous level, but a dramatic drop in the last month, and that's going to be hurtful, very hurtful to Australia. So I don't know whether you're thinking just the coal business or the resources business generally. Gold business has been absolutely terrific, and one of the big factors there is gold, like all our resources, are priced in US dollars. So when our dollar is weaker against the US, we're getting more Australian dollars for the same product.
There's a question from Jason in the chat. What brings you joy, Tony?
Hugging grandchildren. I would say the most beautiful thing is being honored. We write notes. I like writing, and I write notes to each of the grandkids quite a bit, and they write back the most loving, beautiful, just 2 or 3 paragraphs, but it's so beautiful, and that brings me as much joy as anything.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions, gentlemen? There was a comment. I don't know. You seem to be wearing a blue ring, Tony. I wasn't aware of that. If there's any significance to that, but if any other questions, whilst you answer that, there's a question coming from Andrew. Oh, Andrew, go on.
Oh, Tony, look, thank you very much for your talk today and honesty. I was just curious how you processed and came to grips with the loss of your dad at an early age, and how you came to terms with their use of alcohol, and was alcohol ever a problem for yourself?
Andrew, thank you. I'm very, very conscious of the answer is no, it hasn't been. And my dad did something really wise. He made a promise to me when I was probably 15, 14, that if I got to 21 and didn't drink or smoke, he would give me £1,000. And that was a lot of money. And in fact, it bought me a sports car in those days. So I didn't drink or smoke, which was a really super thing to do. And now I don't drink much at all. I have one drink every night and drink wine about once every 2 weeks. And I'm not opposed to it, but I'm very conscious of it. And I'm conscious of it in other people. Subconsciously, I'm watching what they're doing, and I'm sort of alert to some people who suffer from it. And I've had it in the family. One of my sisters had a problem with it. But it hasn't been a problem to me, but I've been really, really watchful. Going back to my father's death, obviously it was a traumatic thing. I was in hospital at the time, and I just had an operation for an undescended testing, and they took me out of hospital a couple of days earlier, put me on a plane, went back to the hometown, and nobody knew until I'd arrived that he'd actually died that night, which was his 44th birthday. So this well-to-do, well-off, I think well-respected man, just gone at age 44. Just made no sense at all.
Thank you. A question from Stephen.
Hi, Tony. So often I hear that people who've been successful read a lot of books. So that is one question. Do you read a lot, and are there any authors that interest you? And then following on from you asking, I think you said you asked somebody you talked about what they looked for in people when they select them. What do you look for in people that you select for leadership roles?
The first question is, yes, I've read quite a lot. And the last couple of years, I haven't read much at all because I've been working on the book, doing thinking and researching and drafting and redrafting and so on. But I said to Ray only 1 or 2 nights ago, I've got all this stuff piled up on the table. I can't wait to stop working and read it. You know, there's some wonderful things there, and I do enjoy it. And I'm pretty meticulous. When I see something that I like or sticks to me, I write it out, and I've got all these millions of references filed away. And Peter will be able to say that I've got quite a few quotes in the book of people that have statements that have impacted me. What do I look for? I look for interpersonal skills, I think, as much as anything. People who can relate to other people well, and some of us are good at that, and some of us are not so good. And I like that. And and look for it a lot.
We're going to just take one last very quick question because we've only got a couple of minutes. So from the Adelaide crew.
All right. Thank you very much, Tony. I'm more interested in how you manage the relationship between yourself and your children, moving from one place to the other. Because you observe that most often there's always a price to pay, trying to be successful and your family. So how did you manage the relationship with your children? How were you able to influence them as you were moving around and trying to be successful in your field?
Oh, that's a good question, and it's pretty sad when I think back of the extraordinary amount of travel and commitment I'd made to business and not giving enough time for the kids as they're growing up. And, when we were back in Australia, I was managed some success, but I'm home every night and not traveling too much at all. But once we got to Europe, it started when we moved to Egypt. I was away a lot, and it was a terrible thing for them and for Ray, who had to deal with all the issues of the young family. So that wasn't a good thing.
Gentlemen, apologies for those who haven't been able to ask their question. Thank you again, Tony. It's been wonderful for you to share openly about your life, the highs, but very much also the lows, which we appreciate your honesty. As Tony said, this book will be available, so do look out for that and reach out if you'd like to know more about that book launch. Let me just quickly close by saying a couple of things. Firstly, that you will get an email, and that's an opportunity for you, if you are not receiving the emails about these meetings, to indicate your interest. Next week, many of us meet in small groups, and that's the heart of the fellowship, as Oliver explained at the outset. So why not consider even next week joining and get to reflect on what Tony shared, but also get to know one another a little better. We're then going to take a pause as we operate on a school term basis. And the next gathering in this format is going to be on Friday, the 8th of October, when Mike Baird will be our guest who will be interviewed. Friday, the 8th of October, but more details will be forthcoming. So as I said at the start, we're going to close with a short prayer. And I wonder whether Jim Wallace, who has a long association with Tony, might be willing to do that.
Well, look, let me just thank Tony. I have had a long association with Tony. I have a great admiration for him. And I really recommend the book. I haven't read it, but I think that was a great presentation, Tony. Let's just come to the Lord, eh? Well, Father, we just thank you for the example of Tony's life. We thank you, Father, for the redemptive power that's so evident in his life. We pray, Father, that each of us might know that fully, that we would enjoy your peace. We pray, Father, that with the benefit of that, though, we may do great things for you, Father. And we just pray that as we go out today, all of us and all the various places we are, that we might bring glory to you, Father, and advance your purpose and your kingdom in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jim. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day. See you next time.
Thank you.